Fucking, I can't do this game anymore. I don't want to do this game. No. Definitely don't want to play it. Like, I have to uninstall this game. Never play this game ever again. This game is just not fun. It's like, it's a piece of shit game. I can't play it. I don't want to play it. It's super boring to play. I cannot play it. I'm not interested. It's for little phony kids. Phony, and I mean phony. It's for phony kids that don't know anything about video games. Please get it out of here. I don't want to play it anymore. Uninstall it so that I can have some... Uninstall this thing. I don't... uninstall it. Get rid of it. Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
A few moments later.
No store credit. I want my money back. There's nothing that I can do about it. That's just their policy. Like, it won't even come back in as a return for a brand new game. It's when I scan your receipt, it's gonna see when this one was bought, and it's gonna automatically give you trade credit. How you doing today, sir? Thank you for calling GameStop. This is Brian. How can I help you?
What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from the Quartering, and lots of news, lots of updates to The Last of Us Part 2. I think I'll probably only do one, maybe two videos on it today. If the appetite's still there, there's definitely plenty to talk about. Now, the first thing that grabbed my attention was the interesting story that refunds were not being honored on The Last of Us Part 2. No more refunds, apparently. But I don't know exactly if I can interpret it as such. JB Hi-Fi is not accepting any more The Last of Us Part 2 trade-ins. People are having a difficult time playing through The Last of Us Part 2 due to some of its spicy scenes and are reportedly returning the game en masse. Now again, where? What we see is a sign that says, "Dear customers, in light of recent events, we've had to change a few things. We will be temporarily suspending game trade-ins until further notice." That's not... It doesn't say trade-ins of The Last of Us 2. It just says trade-ins. There are some highly controversial and other elements to Naughty Dog's new AAA title, The Last of Us Part 2, by the way, which is selling, I think, pacing to be the biggest... It's still pacing to be the biggest PlayStation exclusive ever. Earlier this year, Naughty Dog's president himself, Neil Druckmann, warned people that not everyone is going to like the direction The Last of Us 2 is going. Sony and Naughty Dog, the game is filled with all sorts of spicy stuff. Australia's largest game retailer, JB Hi-Fi, are reportedly not accepting any more returns of The Last of Us Part 2 and have temporarily suspended trade-ins during the game's release. Now, the implication is, of course, that now... that they just got rid of the trade-in policy because it's so bad on The Last of Us 2. It says, "We've reached out to JB Hi-Fi for comment regarding the temporary suspension of trade-ins, as we understand that the temporary ban may in fact be locked." Oh, look at you. You did it. This website is getting some level of journalistic integrity, at least in this article. However, this is the first time people have reported seeing the sign, and it's only posted on the Last of Us Part 2 display, and people have claimed that JB Hi-Fi have been accepting trade-ins during lockdown. The reviews on the official product page of JB Hi-Fi seem to echo the sentiments that a lot of people are unhappy with the game and intended to return it. Philly wrote, quote, "Enjoyed the game. First game and story. Part 2, however, clearly has improved graphics but does little to innovate the mechanics. It's still a creep, loot, shoot, repeat only. It has a flat, boring story. There's the LGBT stuff doesn't bother me, but I feel it would bother some people as it's really shoved down your throat a bit there. After sitting through hours of the gameplay, it felt more like an interactive movie. The boredom has become too great. I'll be returning / selling this game soon. What a shame." Now, I don't think that we've got enough here to say that it's for sure because of The Last of Us 2, but you could argue that it's possible. Here, The Last of Us 2 sits at a 3.6 or basically a 7.2 overall review with only 38 reviews. I haven't seen any actual official announcement, so I don't think I feel comfortable saying it's for sure because of The Last of Us 2, but you could make that argument. Now we can check in on the user scores over on Metacritic, which now sit at just under 56,000 total reviews, and the user score has creeped only to a paltry 4.0 out of 10, with 34,900 negative reviews compared to just 19,000 positive reviews. And interestingly enough, one thing I found curious was we looked at the critics, okay? The critical acclaim that everyone said was to be worshipped as absolute truth. And that all the negative reviews on Metacritic were a result of Russian bots, as Naughty Dog's own employees implied. Well, now 3 very large YouTube personalities, both Angry Joe, Angry Joe, Critical, and Layman Gaming, SkillUp, all trash the game. These are large, well-respected YouTubers with histories of reviewing video games in an honest and ethical manner. All hated it. Angry Joe literally walked away from the game live on stream. So we have 3 trusted YouTube reviewers here all panning the game. I think Critical gave it a 55 out of 100. Joe hates it. I haven't seen his final review yet. And SkillUp tanked it as well. So are they all Russian bots too? You know, in a world where, you know, the guy that runs SkillUp and Angry Joe are both very progressive in their political views. Are they disliking the game because LGBTQ themes? No, of course not. They're not liking the game because they don't like the game, and they are using that. They're using that community as a shield, shockingly enough. And actually, we saw with Eric Kane even pointed out, I want to find his tweet because, you know, a lot of these people too are talking about how the themes, people are just giving The Last of Us 2 a bad score because of the LGBTQ themes, even though the DLC for The Last of Us Part 1, which was essentially entirely about Maggie coming out. Sorry, I looked over at my assistant Maggie, and then I just said her name. So there was full of LGBTQ themes, and it was wildly well reviewed. It was 94, 95 out of 100, I believe. So no, of course it's not because of that. Are there some people out there that have some sort of issue with this? Of course there is, and it's sad, honestly. You should review the game based on its own merits, absolutely. But the idea that The Last of Us, which is always heavily leaned progressive in its in-game politics, now all of a sudden people have a problem with it. Over the last 5 years, 7 years later, now all of a sudden people have a problem with it. It's ridiculous. Neil Druckmann here with the absolute Chad move, though, of on the 19th, pointing to the fact that so many people were reviewing the game, saying, oh man, in a few hours, we have hit almost double the number of user reviews from The Last of Us Part 2 than the first game received in 7 years. Love the passion. And I had to give it up to Neil there. I really did, because, that is kind of low-key Chad. He did cut off the fact that they were all terrible review scores, which he knew what he was doing, so you got to give him some credit. He's laughing all the way to the bank, too. This game is selling exceedingly well, regardless of whether or not people like the game. You see here, The Last of Us Part 2 breaking down what players hate in the game. The Last of Us Part 2 is undoubtedly Naughty Dog's biggest project yet. People have been waiting for the game since its announcement. Unfortunately, the game opened to mixed reviews, and now many from the fan base expressed their displeasure with the game's storyline. Done playing The Last of Us 2, pretty much disappointing. The only good thing about the game is the insanely good graphics, and the gameplay is quite fun. The rest, well, pretty much disappointing. You can see here, how to ruin a franchise with bad story writing. Last of Us Part 2, Star Wars The Last Jedi, Game of Thrones Season 8. Why are friends mad? Well, you could talk about some of the false advertising that people went on. This tweet was very popular too. Whoever advertised The Last of Us 2, you would be for making us think Joel survives. You jerk. Whoever wrote the story, you're a jerk. You should be leave writing. Give up most Walmart death scene I've ever seen in writing. Lousy writing. A lot of things, when you look at Critical's review, he talks about just the poor writing. You can see Jesse's passing was the most pathetic thing ever. Just everything. Here's even Young, yeah. 13 hours into The Last of Us 2, on one hand, it has some of the most impressive visual sounds, performances, and presentation in a video game ever. Insane attention to detail. On the other hand, the gameplay is wearing thin, and I don't know how I feel about the story. Will share final thoughts when finished. Well, he doesn't like the story, but Young has now moved to California, so I don't know if he's going to feel as inclined to be as honest, because he does want to get into his little voice acting career, which I suppose is cool. Absolutely. People should want to do things outside of YouTube. You could say, okay, I'm 4 to 5 hours in The Last of Us Part 2, and all I have to say is, did Neil Druckmann forget that Joel literally ran over a guy because he didn't trust him and knew he was faking being hurt? He has always been so cautious and aware of everything around him. Several others have criticized Abby. She is playable in the game, and fans of Joel were not happy about that. Others question the ending of the game. To clarify, Abby causes Ellie a lot of pain, but in the end, she spares her. Fans consider the ending to be illogical and unjustified. You can see lots of already muted because some ignorant person to come and say blah, blah, blah. The game is not all bad. Some people really like it. And of course, I mean, obviously lots of people are going to like the game. There's really no question about it. But here's an interesting thing too. The accusations of misleading. Naughty Dog has misled The Last of Us fans with swapped models. Now that The Last of Us 2 is out, it's now confirmed that Naughty Dog's marketing claims did not turn out to be truthful to gamers. The Last of Us 2 false advertising has been spotted, as Naughty Dog has purposely replaced character models to mislead fans. Warning to all the stories filled with spoilers. Back in 2016, Naughty Dog debuted The Last of Us 2 trailer. In it, we saw Ellie covered in blood playing the guitar with an old man version of Joel making an appearance at the very end. It was clear from the trailer that Ellie was on some sort of revenge path, setting the stage for expectations. Of course, being 4 years old now, the development of Last of Us 2 lucky went through a lot of changes. In fact, the scene is no longer present in the final build of the game, which shouldn't come as much as a surprise, considering that it was just a teaser. However, the tease originally implied that Joel had a much bigger involvement in the main campaign, and in fact, actually backed up by evidence, as the studio had marketed Joel to be far more involved in the latter portion of the story. Again, spoiler warning, still with us? Okay, so in The Last of Us Part 2, Joe's story ends very close to the beginning of the game, a rather controversial moment for many. However, it's actually the scenes that occurred later in the campaign that has many wondering if his passing was actually originally intended. Taking a look back at the trailer from 8 months ago, there's a scene where Joel appears and grabs Ellie from behind and utters a line, "You think I'd like you do this on your own. You think I'd like you do this." That doesn't even make sense. So you have this, you have other cuts. Jesse, I think, oh, "I'd let you do this on your own." So they had a typo there. Okay. It's the same line, same scene. As you can see, both backgrounds are very staircase. The only difference is Joel is absent. The trailer isn't even old either. It was published 8 months back and for the official release date. So did they fake put Joel in this scene and then decide to cut him? The question is, did they decide to cut Joel after the fact, or did they purposely mislead fans? I want to believe that they did not purposely mislead fans. I sincerely hope that isn't the case. But then you have, obviously, bootlickers like Kalu Pettis, who is a critic, by the way, actor, film critic, bylines at a bunch of websites that are untrustworthy, like Rotten Tomatoes, saying, "The fact that 0.4% of players have finished the story on The Last of Us Part 2, yet the game has a 3.4 out of 10 user score on Metacritic says a lot about a bunch of people. Don't give concrete scores until you finish the game. I've seen some negatively rate the game without even playing it." Well, again, this line of logic falls apart instantly when you pull up the reviews and you see the number of 10 out of 10s. I didn't play the game, but I came and left a 10 out of 10 to own the haters. Ultimately, there are fake reviews on both sides. One of the biggest complaints I've heard from people is that you don't play as Ellie the whole game, and I genuinely don't understand how that massively affects your enjoyment of the game. Are you joking? I mean, it's absolutely absurd. You don't need to complete an entire game either to review it. You can honestly, if you don't like it, if you don't like the gameplay early on, you think the graphics are poor, you think that the story, you know, you've reached the point where you put the controller down and you're absolutely done, well, that's just the way it is. But, you know, The Last of Us Part 2 sales smash record to become Sony's fastest selling PS4 game ever. Absolutely. I think if people thought that this game wasn't going to sell, they're crazy. I knew the game was going to sell very well, and I said it even back to my very first videos on the topic. Just because people buy the game doesn't make it a good game. That's a fact. And certainly there are plenty of people who are not happy with the outcome. As Metacritic would point out, 35,000 of them disliked the game. So 19,000 that allegedly liked it. Both are full of bots and fake reviews nonetheless. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you leave a like and a comment on it, and we'll talk to you again real soon.